Test.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to thank our sponsors for making this event possible as we explore an issue that's critical to helping the Northeast Ohio region achieve a truly vibrant economy: women's participation in the labor force. I'm Bill Kaler, CEO of Team NEO. For those of you who are not familiar with Team NEO, we are a business and economic development nonprofit focused on building a vibrant economy for Northeast Ohio. As Jobs Ohio's network partner in Northeast Ohio, we work to engage companies within a network of economic development and public sector partners to help our economy grow and create prosperity for all residents in the region. One of the really important roles we play involves delivering insights that inform economic development strategy conversations, drive regional growth, and ensure that all members of our community have opportunities to participate in our region's prosperity. Our insights are informed by robust data analysis that's utilized in workforce strategy conversations throughout our community. Today's event highlights our most recent example of that work. It marks the official launch of Team NEO's latest research report. We call it Lost Opportunities. In this report, we explore the significant barriers to participation women have overcome and ones that still remain. The report looks deeply at how COVID-19 has affected the labor markets and the pandemic's disparate impact on working women, both nationally and locally. Lost Opportunities is a supplement to Team NEO's annual Aligning Opportunities report, which provides a clear assessment of in-demand jobs, the availability of trained workers to meet demand, and a picture of what skills and training our workforce needs to fill them. It also complements our Misaligned Opportunities report, a supplement we released last year that took a deeper look at racial equity as it relates to labor force opportunities to inform conversations and influence solutions that we as a region can implement to affect positive change. Taken together, these reports provide clear direction for an effective regional talent strategy. Access to talent is becoming the number one consideration when companies make investment decisions. A better, more informed talent strategy improves our region's competitiveness. We look forward to any conversations about insights in our Lost Opportunities report and to sharing the next Aligning Opportunities report in the third quarter later this year. We're honored to welcome several notable guests today who will help us provide greater insights and depth to the topic of women in the labor force, historically as well as today. Sandra Palavoda and Jacob Duritsky from Team NEO's Research Insights team are esteemed panelists. Lisa Aurelio, Chief Operating Officer from Akron Children's Hospital. Sarah Nash, Majority Owner, Chairman, CEO, and President of NovaGuard. Rachel Sampson, Senior Vice President, National Director of Key for Women at KeyBank. And Margaret Trimmer, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Delta Dental of Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana. Plus, our panel moderator, Maureen Harper, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs at Falls. I'm joined first by Kim Riley, who's the president of Highland Insurance here in Cleveland. Kim is a strategic thinker, highly creative, an executive with over 30 years of industry experience in the insurance industry. Perhaps just as important, Kim is a very engaged civic leader in Northeast Ohio and the current vice chair of our Team NEO board. Kim, thanks for joining us today. It's great to be here in person, since we're both vaccinated, and we can have a really good discussion about this.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Bill. I am so honored to be here today.
So you were the first to see the Lost Opportunities report. Tell us your reaction as you saw the findings and how it resonated with what you're seeing in the market.
So this report is so important for the leaders within Northeast Ohio. It's going to guide us on business decisions we need to make with our most important asset that we have at our companies, which is our people. Many of our people have been affected during the pandemic. And how has it changed their family dynamic, as well as how they approach going back to work as we start this next phase of the pandemic?
Why is it so important that Team Neo takes this topic on?
Because workforce and talent is so important to our region. If we want companies to stay in our region, and we want companies to expand in our region, as well as relocate to our region, we need to have a very strong workforce and talent base. So when they move here, they know they can find the employees that they need with the skill sets that they need for their companies.
And I heard you say that women in the workforce in particular have been impacted in the last year or so because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Very important issue. And I've seen it with my own employee base and with my daughter who has small children. Many women during this pandemic, they lost their childcare. They had to go work at home and juggle schooling their children at home. Husbands did a great job jumping in, and they juggled the way they could as a family. But those women that are single working moms, they really struggled during this time. And as employers, we need to step up. And right now, maybe our current HR policies don't apply. We've got to be flexible. We've got to listen to what our employees need and want. And we've got to be and adjust so that our talent will come back to work.
So it's interesting, as we have talked about the talent issue at Team Neo, we've talked about through our Aligning Opportunities report, the gap. And we've also talked about the impact that systemic barriers would have on race through our Misaligned Opportunities report. Very much of this is about tapping into different talent pools. What you're saying, yes, we need to do that, but we also have to protect the talent pools and continue to grow the talent that we have. And women in the workforce, the women in the workforce have had challenges doing that.
Yeah, so I can speak to the insurance industry because that's the industry I'm in. So my industry employs 2.6 million people. 61% are women. But as you move up the ranks, if you look at the VP level, that 61% drops to 30%. If you look at the C-suite, as it moves up, it drops to 18%. How do we continue to have those women in our field, in our workforce, and build their skill sets? We may need to do additional training. We may need to go out and look for new talent to bring them in. So it's going to be at every level where we're going to encounter these issues.
We can grow our talent and increase the number of opportunities for women if they're not able to consistently work in the workforce, build the new experiences, build the networks, the relationships, and the experiences in order to make it happen.
Yes, we can. We just got to be very thoughtful about it. So as these women come back to the workforce, maybe they took a leave of absence for what they had to take care of, and now they're coming back. How do we jumpstart them and get them back to where they would have been if they would have been with us the last year? We have a responsibility to make sure we're doing that so that we can drive them to where we need them in our organization.
As the father of two daughters, I've seen from their experience over the last year as they're new in the workforce as 20-somethings, seeing how they are impacted by the pandemic and how they have perceived the impact that the pandemic's had on women who are their peers, women who are their mentors or potential mentors, and those kinds of things. And I wonder whether, in your mind, it matters for people who are more newer in their career or more advanced in their career on how they navigate these issues.
That's a really good question, Bill. I think it doesn't matter where you're coming in at. If you're coming in at an entry-level position, I think entry-level people have great opportunity ahead of them. There are going to be so many businesses that are growing in Northeast Ohio that we're going to need that new talent, that constant stream of new talent. I think we also have the challenge that maybe women or men at an older age who were planning on staying in the workforce for a while, they're exiting. And so we're going to need to build those skill sets up really quickly and navigate both sides of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So part of Team Neo's role is to identify opportunities like this, build strategies, encourage alignment amongst others in the economic development community. What would your advice or expectation be of other organizations, companies in the community, around how we all take this on together?
So I moved here from Nashville, Tennessee 4 years ago, and economic development was booming there. And what I can tell you in that community is every single organization was aligned to drive bringing new businesses to our area and expanding businesses in industry that was in our area. And that's what I think we can make happen in Northeast Ohio. And I think that's Team NEO's job, is to align all of our organizations in our region so that we're all working together for that common goal of making Northeast Ohio the best it can be. And I think every business leader in our community has a responsibility to step up and help all of these partner organizations and Team NEO so we can all be successful. It's not one silver bullet that's going to make Northeast Ohio great. It's going to take each and every one of us to drive it and to make it successful in the long term.
And appropriate to the conversation today, it's demonstrating leadership, it's creating mentorship opportunities, be a good role model, whether it relates to race, whether it relates to gender, whether it relates to just good leadership.
And I think there's a lot of people in Northeast Ohio, a lot of leaders that don't even know what we're doing around economic development, which is shocking to me as I'm out meeting with people and being an ambassador for Team NEO. There are many CEOs that ask, what is Team NEO? And so it's a great opportunity for me to share what I'm doing with Team NEO, my passion around economic development in our region, and how that I can get them engaged with you.
Why is it so important to you that as a vice chair, Team NEO, a woman, are playing you are playing the kind of leadership role you're playing?
For the future generations. My grandchildren live in Northeast Ohio, and I want them to have great opportunities in this region. We know Northeast Ohio is a boomerang region. Lots of people go away to college, they boomerang back eventually. We want them to stay here. We want the people that come to our colleges and universities to stay here after they're educated. Once we can make that happen, we're going to have a steady flow of talent. And that's why the Aligning Opportunities report is such an important report for our region.
Kim, thank you very much for being here today. We really appreciate your support, your commitment to the community, and all we're doing together to create a more vibrant economy in Northeast Ohio. Vibrant, one that is more talented, equitable, innovative, resilient, competitive, and prosperous. We are grateful for your impact as a leader at Team NEO, as well as your leadership as a female executive in Northeast Ohio. At this time, we'd like to pause to thank our sponsors for making the Lost Opportunities Research and this event possible, especially our presenting sponsor, ZAMAT. Your contributions are critical to the advancement of Northeast Ohio. I invite Nancy and Terrell Dillard from ZAMAT to say a few words.
Thanks, Bill. First, I am honored to serve on Team NEO's board of directors and excited to be a presenting sponsor of Team NEO's Lost Opportunities program. This work aligns well with our business goals to provide opportunity for all. My wife and I own two companies headquartered right here in Northeast Ohio, ZAMAT Distributors and JanPro of Greater Cleveland, Akron, and Toledo. ZAMAT is currently delivering construction supplies and/or fuel to most major infrastructure projects in this region, and half of my staff is comprised of exceptional women. It's an honor to sponsor an event that addresses the importance of women's contributions and opportunities that could be lost if we do not find ways to retain, promote, and advance women in the workplace by mitigating common challenges. Speaking of exceptional women, I would like to introduce my wife, Nancy, who can talk more about our JanPro business.
Thanks, Terrell. At JanPro of Greater Cleveland, Akron, and Toledo, I'm proud to say we give people an opportunity to own their own business. Over half of our 200 plus owners are minority women, servicing close to 1,000 customers in Northeast Ohio alone. Besides Team NEO's Lost Opportunities program, we are excited to be a part of Team NEO's larger Aligning Opportunities work and helping to elevate females and minorities. Thanks again to everyone involved in this important work.
And now I'm honored to introduce Sandra Palavoda, Team NEO Research Associate, to provide an overview of the lost opportunities findings. Over to you, Sandra.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here today. As Kim said, my name is Sandra Palavoda, and I've been Research Associate at Team NEO for a little over a year now. First, I want to take a moment to shed some light on why we named this report Lost Opportunities. We wanted our audience to absorb this data through the lens of how opportunities could be lost as a result of COVID's impact on women, our institutions and resources, and all Northeast Ohio workers. We want you, the audience, to read this and think, where are we losing out on opportunities in our own companies? Are our training programs up to date? Do we need to take a look at how women or new hires are set up to succeed at our company? Investing in women and talent in general makes our company's region and attraction efforts stronger. We started framing this report late last year as we saw stories rolling in about the number of women leaving the labor force. After extensive readings, data collection, and analysis, we saw the bones of this report take shape. In this report, you'll find a combination of data from the U.S. Census, Federal Reserve, national news, and labor market tools like Moody's and EMSI economic modeling that the research department uses daily here at Team NEO. We review where women were in the economy before COVID hit and how working women have made strides in the workforce, education, and business. But even before the pandemic, that progress has continuously been under threat from systemic issues like unequal pay, rigid maternity and paternity policies, and hiring biases. From a regional perspective, we provide data on the breakdown of women in industries and occupations, as well as the annual wages women make in those jobs. This helps us get a better look at the connection between women's wages and the sectors they work in. For example, women make up over 85% of healthcare support occupations, the third lowest paying jobs after personal care and food preparation. Through this type of analysis, we can start to see which jobs and which industries could benefit from taking a harder look at how they invest in their talent, specifically women. We wrap up the report with case studies from 5 organizations leading the way in equity, connection, mentorship, and women's advancement. Engage Cleveland, Girl Scouts of Northeast Ohio, S3 Technologies, YWCA of Greater Cleveland, and Tri-C's Women in Transition program all have mechanisms built into their operations that help women grow and thrive in their environment. I'm excited you'll get to learn more about them in the report. Team NEO expanded on this research because these gaps and the representation of women and men in various industries and occupations influences our competitiveness as a region. As new data is released, studies conducted on the impact of COVID-19, and policymakers look towards solutions to help people work, we will likewise be looking for new ways to share our findings with you. Keep your eyes out for updates to aligning and misaligned opportunities this year as we look to analyze COVID's impact on in-demand jobs and our region's diverse populations. I'm confident you'll enjoy reading this report. We thoroughly enjoyed the research and discussions born out of this process. For more details on the data, I'd like to introduce Jacob Duritsky, Vice President of Strategy and Research.
Good morning, Sandra. Thank you so much for that introduction to the report and for all the hard work you did on this. Bill, Kim, thank you for that conversation. I think it's the dialogue that reports like this can create that can help to drive solutions to some of these problems and issues over time. Thanks for spending 10 minutes with me this morning as I talk through some of the findings from Lost Opportunities. As Bill mentioned, this is a companion piece to our Aligning Opportunities and Misaligned Opportunities report. As we saw the impact the pandemic was having on women in the workforce, we decided that focusing on some of those unique challenges to women in Northeast Ohio was an important component of how we think about the talent challenge we need to solve as a region. I'll take you back to Aligning Opportunities and Misaligned Opportunities briefly. As we think about the demographic headwinds we face as a region, declining population, declining labor force size, we can't grow our way out of these trends. If we don't do a good job of connecting everyone here in Northeast Ohio to where the opportunities exist, we aren't going to thrive and prosper as an economy in the way we think we can. With that said, I also want to point out something that I think is really important about the data from Lost Opportunities. While we highlight the pandemic and the pandemic's impact on women, It's not just the pandemic that showed the disparities that existed. It's the data that we looked at before the pandemic. Even looking at a lot of data from 2017, 2018, 2019, what it showed was there was an unequal playing field in Northeast Ohio, particularly for women. That is a challenge that we have to solve. The pandemic may help drive change in some ways, but we as a region need to do better as well. With that, I will take you through lost opportunities. So we did something a little unique in this report. We went all the way back to 1948 to look at women's labor force participation rates in the overall economy. Now, this is the US we're looking at right now. Back in 1948, you could see that labor force participation rates for women tended to be around 35%. Only about a third of women were working in the economy in some way. That steadily grew over the next several decades, peaking somewhere around 2000 at participation rates around 60%. And unfortunately, after the recession in 01 and the Great Recession, we saw some declines in those rates. Those were just starting to grow again when the pandemic hit, and we saw a steep decline. Somewhere, estimates show between 3 and 4% of all women leaving the labor force and leaving very quickly. It's a trend that we need to see reversed, and it's also a gap that, although it was growing and the gap was closing, we need to do a better job of closing overall. And there's an important reason for that. As we look at the data, women represent one of our highest educated populations overall in Northeast Ohio. They have higher rates of bachelor's plus attainment. They have higher rates of graduate degrees in the region. They are the educated workforce of the future. And that is not to take away from men in the region who also have strong BA plus rates, but women have been driving that over time. The challenge, however, is that that education has not led to equitable outcomes in the overall economy as we think about it. While women represent about 45% of the hours worked in Northeast Ohio in any given year, so almost half, the wage gap that we see going back to 2019 was around 23% lower for women than it was for men. Men on average got about $52,500 in 2019. That number for women was $40,500. So even with disproportionately higher education, still not seeing the benefits, and also not seeing the benefits regardless of educational attainment. Unfortunately, in Northeast Ohio and in many parts of the country, the more education you have, the wider that gap actually grows. Depending on whether you have a high school diploma or a professional or graduate degree, that gap can range anywhere from $11,000 to more than $21,000 annually. To think a woman in Northeast Ohio with a bachelor's degree, on average in 2019, earned the same amount as a man with an associate's degree. A woman with a professional degree earned $21,128 less than a man with a professional degree. These aren't trends that are sustainable if we want to continue to grow and thrive and keep women as a core important piece of the economy overall. It also shows up in poverty. When you look at some of the national poverty data that we've seen over time, while the trends are very similar for men and women, at any given time in this country, 500,000 more women are experiencing the impact of poverty and working poverty. And in Northeast Ohio, that number is even higher. 61% of working women in Northeast Ohio are working in poverty. Almost 2/3 of our entire labor force of women working of people in poverty are women. These trends are absolutely not sustainable if we think about what we need to do to grow and thrive as an economy. And it goes beyond the data piece. It goes to those important core services, the wraparound services, the needs of families and others that are so critical to helping women stay in Northeast Ohio's workforce. When we think a little more directly about the impact of the pandemic, you can start to infer some of what we're seeing in the data nationally and how that has impacted women in Northeast Ohio. We know that throughout the country, women were 2 more times likelier than men to leave the workforce as a couple to take care of children through the pandemic, disproportionately fell on their shoulders. We also know that in 2020, women were 4 times more likely to leave the workforce overall, regardless of their status as single or a married couple. And we know that the sectors that are represented most highly by women, healthcare, accommodations, education, represented some of the deepest declines that we saw in Northeast Ohio's economy throughout the pandemic. The 5 sectors represented most by women alone accounted for about half of the job loss that we saw in Northeast Ohio. More than 70,000 jobs in those 5 sectors alone saw declines. Again, a disproportionate impact to a situation that already wasn't equal. When you look at the impact on business ownership, you can see it showing up in the data as well. Women disproportionately own businesses in those sectors that have been adversely impacted by the pandemic, whether that's healthcare, professional services, retail, accommodation and services. Those sectors that saw the steepest declines in occupational employment also are the sectors most represented by women in terms of business ownership. The challenge, however, is that even pre-pandemic, that business ownership picture was certainly not perfect. Women own only 16% of Northeast Ohio's businesses, according to the data. In no case, in no industry sector, are women represented through business ownership of more than 20% of a sector of the economy. Again, these trends need to change if we're going to address this over time. And as we think through the lens of the work, not just the industry, but the occupations, you see significant representation in healthcare. You see significant representation in education. But we also see is an unevenness in how degrees are being completed and how degrees are being conferred. For instance, if you look at women's role in healthcare, you find a significant number of them in things like registered nursing and nurse practitioners. However, if you look at the data beyond that, it drops off sharply as you start to look at things like medical doctors. Again, an unequal playing field, even within those sectors where there is strong industry representation. That is not to take anything away from registered nursing or take anything away from nurse practitioners, but it is to suggest that we have strong elements of our economy that are in demand and don't have equal representation from women. When we talk about aligning opportunities or misaligned opportunities and now lost opportunities, one of the things we always focus on is those key in-demand areas of the economy. IT, manufacturing, healthcare. They represent in any given year 50 to 55,000 job openings throughout Northeast Ohio. And what we see when we look at those sectors from a degrees conferred perspective, 2 years, 4 years, certificates, is again, disproportionate underrepresentation in most of those sectors, in most of those jobs. While healthcare does represent about 79% of the completions through women, in IT, that number was only 28%, and in manufacturing, that number was only 17%. That's across a variety of jobs, a variety of occupations, a variety of roles. There is unequal representation in the economy in key areas where we need to help align supply with the demand in the marketplace. And as we think even more broadly about that, when we look at the top 20 occupations in demand, those that pay family sustaining wages, offer good growth perspective, low risk of automation for the next 5 to 10 years, we see that although there is strong representation throughout the healthcare field, particularly in physical therapy and registered nursing and nurse practitioners, it drops off markedly as we start focusing on some of those very highly STEM-related occupations. Engineering, IT, elements of manufacturing show significant underrepresentation from women in the workforce today. We'll get to the Q&A in a second, but I wanted to take a second and pause from the data conversation to reinforce something that Sandra said, which is, although the data is hard to look at in many ways, and I'm speaking now as the father of a daughter who's a freshman in college and a 7-year-old daughter as well, these trends are disturbing. But there are organizations, there are companies in the region who are doing very, very creative things to approach solutions to some of these critical challenges. YWCA, Tri-Cities Women in Transition Program, Engage Cleveland, S3 Technologies, the Girl Scouts of Northeast Ohio are all developing critical solutions to how we drive some of these change going forward. So with that said, the pandemic has accelerated unequal trends in the workforce, but make no mistake, those trends were there prior to the pandemic as well. There are significant gaps in areas of the economy where we need women representation, just like we need diversity, equity, and inclusion representation the most to help close these gaps over time. There simply is no silver bullet to figuring these things out. We need a more inclusive economy for everyone. But there are creative companies and organizations taking these challenges on, taking these challenges seriously, and starting to address solutions over time. I appreciate the time this morning. I appreciate you walking through the data. And now we will take a quick question and answer segment. I would encourage you, if you do have questions, please post those in the chat, and Sandra will be reading those off to me.
Hi, Jacob. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions here in the Q&A. The first one is, how does educational attainment among women in Northeast Ohio compare with that of other regions?
Yeah, good question. So what we see is that while women have a higher rate of bachelor's plus attainment in Northeast Ohio, it's actually lower than a lot of the peer markets we look at. So be that our proximate markets, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, or some of our more aspirational markets like a New York or a Boston or a San Francisco, they have higher rates here, but lower than some of those competitive markets. Where we do see a much higher concentration, though, is in that some college completion. So one of the interesting things behind the data is that while Bachelor Plus might not compete as much with competitive markets, we have an opportunity and we have a challenge, which is there are a lot of people in Northeast Ohio, both women and men, who have started down a pathway, but for whatever reason stopped out or not finished. That offers us a talent pool that as we think about opportunities for alignment, as we think about opportunities to drive demand in some of these sectors going forward, we have a base of people who have started. Now we have to help them find a pathway to complete.
Thank you, Jacob. One more question. What kinds of things are being done by Team NEO or other organizations in the region to help give women more exposure to those good paying and in-demand jobs?
Great question. So for Team NEO specifically, one of the things we've tried to do with aligning opportunities, with misaligned opportunities, and now with lost opportunities is think differently about how we target and message some of the data behind this report. Let's be honest. It's not in most 6th through 12th graders' wheelhouse to pick up a 60-page white paper and read about in-demand occupations. I think we can all agree that's unlikely to happen. But what we have tried to do is to partner with organizations throughout Northeast Ohio, Junior Achievement, Youth Opportunities Unlimited, College Now, to spread the message of where there are in-demand careers to a much younger and younger audience, focused on school districts throughout CMSD and some of our inner ring suburbs, and talking to students, in particular young women, about passion and opportunity and alignment in the economy overall. This isn't a trend, frankly, that we're going to solve overnight, and nor is it going to reverse itself. But it is a set of conversations we have to start having now with much younger people. You know, as we were putting together case studies for this, I was really encouraged by the conversation we had with the Girl Scouts of Northeast Ohio. Part of what they're looking at now involves STEM-related badges and having conversations with young women in K through 12 about STEM opportunities, STEM careers. So I think there is an ecosystem out there that is beginning to address these. Now we just need more of it.
Before I move on to the next question, we did get a comment about the policies of the companies that we highlighted in the report. Just want to mention that those case studies, the YWCA and so forth, those are detailed in the report itself.
Thank you. Yes, much more detail on each of those companies and organizations in the full report.
We have a question coming in. How do you see solutions coming about for those already in positions that are suffering from disparities? An example, stagnation and lower pay rates.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple issues there. One is prioritizing it, acknowledging it, and addressing it. It's the same thing we saw with misaligned opportunities as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's the same thing we're seeing now through lost opportunities. Companies, organizations bear responsibility to understand these issues and do something about it. So I think first and foremost, that's number one. The second is this is a competitiveness issue. You know, whether it's higher wages, whether it's finding the right talent, we bear responsibility to help drive solutions to some of these, in part because it's the only way we're going to solve some of these key talent gaps. And then the third thing I would say is that when you look at the companies who have the least challenges in some of these areas, they're being very flexible. They're being very creative in their thinking about things like our on-site services and how they think differently and hopefully more flexibly about women in the workforce and what they can do and how they can contribute to growth in women's participation and take some of that strain off women that we heard about through the pandemic.
Now that we have this data, what steps is Team NEO taking with employers to hire women and equalize the disparity in pay?
Yeah, so I think it gets back to the way we think about how we can leverage this data. One, we want to inform the conversation taking place in the community. We say that a fact base of data and research is a powerful way to start this dialogue and a powerful way to drive this conversation. We recognize that isn't enough, though. So as we think about our own programmatic efforts and our own influential efforts, partnering with key companies, higher education, sector partnerships throughout Northeast Ohio to bring everyone collectively together at a table and discuss these issues, to drive solutions to these issues is critically important. Spreading and building a bigger brand around that emerging talent message and thinking more creatively about the ways we leverage things like technology, video on our website to address it, and new ways to have conversations is also critically important. And then as we talk with companies about making investments around talent, having some of those hard conversations about the ways that maybe they need to think differently about solving some of these gaps and solving some of these challenges, we think of as a big piece of our responsibility in this role and through this report.
Last question before we move on. What can be done to encourage employers to provide more flexible work arrangements for women so they can use their skill sets but also have time for family?
Yeah, so I think that's where these case studies are so powerful. It's understanding best practices. And it's not to say we need to reinvent the wheel at every organization or every company, but the idea that some of these companies, some of these institutions are employing really creative, real flexible work environments and new opportunities for women should open up a new way to think about the labor force and the way companies engage with the labor force overall. So I think best practices start through sharing and through that conversation. In our panel discussion next, you're going to start to hear some of that conversation and hear about some of the creative ways that leadership throughout Northeast Ohio is taking these issues on. But I hope today is a very small starting point, at least, in beginning to figure some of this out. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for the time this morning, all the participants. This is a hard report to write, like all of our aligning opportunities and misaligned opportunities studies are, but I think a very important one. And I'm looking forward to the panel discussion that's going to follow.